want to thank each and every one of you for being here today. It's overwhelming how many people that were at the breakfast and how many people have showed for this square for this young, great American. Private First Class James P. Hickey, United States Marine Corps. Born 6/3/1949, gave his life for his country when he was 20 years old on 5/27/69. He attended Central Middle School and went to Quincy High School. With us today is his brother John and his sister Christina. "45 years is a long time to wait for something. Maybe the Hickey family thought that no one was out there thinking of them. When we picked the names, we put it out on the street, my phone started ringing. How many kids from Quincy High School? How many kids from North Quincy High School, class of 67? One is Jerry Mullen, quarterbacking for the Soroy and the Keefe family. Joe Shea helping me with the Hickey family, helping us find them. Linda Pershad on her trusted computer. It just never stops. I don't know if anyone's ever seen this. Back in 1969, Life magazine, the faces of the American dead. Vietnam, 1 week's dead. The faces shown on the next pages are the faces of American men killed. In the words of the official announcement of their deaths in connection with the conflict in Vietnam, the names of 242 were released by the Pentagon during the week of May 28th through June 3rd. No special significance except that it included Memorial Day. The numbers of the dead have averaged for any 7-day period during the stage of the war. It is not the intention of this article to speak for the dead. We cannot tell you any precision what they thought of on the political currents which drew them from across the world. From the letters of some, it is possible to tell that they felt strongly that they should be in Vietnam. They had great sympathy for the Vietnamese people, were appalled at the enormous suffering. Some had voluntarily extended their tours of duty. Some were desperate to come home. Their families provided most of these photographs, and many expressed their own feelings that their sons and husbands died in a necessary cause. Yet in a time when the husbands died in their necessary cause, at that time there were 36,000. Far less than the Vietnamese losses had exceeded the death in Korean War. When the nation continues, week after week, to be numbered by a 3-digit statistic, which is translated to direct anguish in hundreds of homes all over the country, we may pause to look into the faces. More than we must know how many, we must know who. The faces of 1 week's dead, unknown but to families and friends, are suddenly recognized by all in this gallery of young American eyes. From all across the country, these 242 young men paid the ultimate sacrifice. And I'm wondering if any of them have been fortunate enough to be honored. We don't know. I've been told no, and I've been told some. By others, I've been told none. With us today is the sister of James Hickey, Christine Hickey Silcox. Christina?
When I talked to Larry about what was going on here, and he asked if we wanted to say anything, and of course there's a lot of things to say, but I thought it'd be best to put it and read a poem to you that my uncle wrote shortly after my brother died. I'll give you a little background. When my brother was a little boy, he used to tell my mother he had a magic horse, and every night he'd go to bed and tie up the horse, and he'd sleep well. And so this is the poem that my uncle wrote as a tribute to my brother. Hold that for And I'm going to really try to get through this. Okay. The magic horse. When he was just a boy, he had a magic horse. No one else could see it, but it was there, of course. He'd gallop off at night and tie it to his bed. He knew it would stand guard, so nothing he must dread. Years have ways of passing, and so do childhood dreams. As boys to manhood grow, almost overnight it seems. Leaving those he loves the most, leaving his magic horse. Now he goes to search out from life its very force. He must be a Marine, though it may bring him harm. Fate will cross his path in the province of Quang Nam. Now speaks a gentle voice. Jim, we mustn't tarry. For I have come this night to take you home to Mary. But father, I'm so young, I do not understand. He knows, my son. He bade me take your hand. He took me too, you know, as I cried out in pain, to ask my father why by men must I be slain. He sacrificed his son so that men might learn to care. He led me to my home, and I must take you there. He will not let you hurt as I did from the cross. Dear Jim, I'll lead you home upon your magic horse. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all of you who've remembered and come for my brother and I.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Larry, thank you,
I'm right here.
thank you, thank you, I did it. I got through it, I got through it. Did it, thank you.
Mr. Belinda, Mr. Connors, will you please present the wreath to Private First Class James B. Hickey, United States Marine Corps, Vietnam, the official square.
Present arms.
Fire in detail. Taps, Mr. LaFleur. Mr. Nasib Mo Marad.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Thank you, Mo. We appreciate that, sir.
Color Guard, Port Arms.
Let me bring him to at ease.
Color Guard.
Ward 4, Councilor Brian Palmucci couldn't be here today. So we have a pinch hitter. He's former council president, Ward 5 councilor. He's vice chair of Veterans Council Committee. Mr. Kevin Coughlin. Kevin? Thank you, sir. I appreciate this.
Thank you, Larry. Good morning, everyone. Commander Norton, members of the Combined Vietnam Veterans Council, and all veterans present here today, thank you for your service. To the family of PFC Hickey, we owe you an unpayable debt of gratitude for your family's sacrifice. It was an honor to meet and speak with you this morning. I'm truly privileged to join you today in this special remembrance, though I feel less than worthy to try and capture in words the significance of this commemoration of the penultimate sacrifice given by a 19-year-old young man, Private First Class James Philip Hickey, A Battery, 1st Battalion, 13th Marines, 1st Marine Division, United States Marine Corps, whose name is etched on panel 38W, row 052 of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall in Washington, along with more than 58,000 men and women of the armed forces who gave their lives or remain missing. I feel less than worthy because I believe, as Teddy Roosevelt observed, that the credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who knows the great devotions and spends himself in a worthy cause. The credit belongs to all of you who have donned the uniform in service to our nation, who stand here today, and to PFC James Hickey, a field artillery cannoneer lost to enemy fire in Quang Province during a mortar attack on a command post on May 27, 1969, who spent himself on a worthy cause. He understood and lived out the words that President John F. Kennedy prepared but never delivered November 22, 1963 at the Dallas Trade Mart when he wrote, "We in this country, in this generation, are by destiny rather than by choice, the watchmen on the walls of the world of freedom. And our nation's strength and security are not easily or cheaply obtained." PFC Hickey and all veterans join seamlessly with our men and women of the armed forces today as the guardians of our freedom, because we as a nation know that freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction, that it must be fought for, protected, and handed down to the next generation, prepared to make that same commitment and sacrifice. Lest we spend our sunset years, as Ronald Reagan once observed, telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States where men were free. My friends, we have often heard it observed, poor is the nation that has no heroes. Shameful is the one that, having them, forgets. Amidst the uncertainties of war, every soldier is entitled to one certainty, that he or she will not be forgotten or abandoned. As a nation, and certainly we here in our beloved city, have been blessed with an abundance of heroes, and with the vigilance of those like Commander Larry Norton and the Combined Vietnam Veterans, we seek to erase the shame we brought upon ourselves in the treatment of returning Vietnam vets, and to ensure that neither PFC James Philip Hickey nor any veteran will ever be forgotten or abandoned. Thank you.
Councilor Coughlin, thank you very much. Our next speaker, Senator John F. Keenan from Norfolk, Plymouth. He's our legislative officer up on the Hill. Senator? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Larry. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to bring you the greetings of the Massachusetts State Senate and the legislature on behalf of my colleagues, State Representative Bruce Ayers, State Representative Tacky Chan, State Representative Dan Hunt, Majority Leader Ron Mariano, and good friend, Representative Walter Timilty from Milton. You know, back in the spring of 1968, a typical teenager here in the city of Quincy, and particularly in this neighborhood, might have been waiting for the warm weather so that they could go jumping up at the quarries. And baseball season was at hand, so maybe they'd be heading over to O'Rourke Field or to Andrews Park to play a little baseball. An afternoon might include a trip up the street to Burger King. And they'd go home, and unfortunately at that time, they would watch on their small TV the stories of the death of Martin Luther King Jr. and the riots that ensued. This was likely the life of Private First Class James Jim Hickey, who lived here on this street in this city neighborhood. But on April 19, 1968, 18-year-old James Hickey joined the Marines, and his life instead became one of boot camp and assignment. At home here in Quincy and Massachusetts and across the country, life went on. There was the tragedy of Robert Kennedy's death, then Apollo 18 was heading to orbit the moon. In 1969, after Private First Class Hickey arrived in Vietnam, Joe Namath and the Jets won the Super Bowl. The Beatles recorded their Yellow Submarine album. Richard Nixon was sworn in as president. Phil Esposito became the first NHL hockey player to score 100 points in a season. A Japanese runner won the Boston Marathon. The Montreal Canadiens won the Stanley Cup, and the Boston Celtics won the NBA title. On May 27, 1969, the construction began at Walt Disney World in Florida. On that same day, May 27, 1969, over 8,000 miles away, Marine Private First Class James P. Hickey, just 1 week short of his 20th birthday, was killed during a mortar attack on a command post. His life was taken, and the lives of his brother John and sister Christine and mother and father would never be the same. So what makes an 18-year-old leave this neighborhood? What makes him trade O'Rourke Field and Andrews Park for a base in Vietnam? Or trade standing in line for a Whopper for a child line over 8,000 miles away? What makes him trade watching TV for the news to waiting for a mail call? What makes him trade tying his magic horse to his post here in Quincy in his bedroom to walking a post in Vietnam at night? What makes him trade loving parents for a Marine drill sergeant? I don't know what prompted Jim Hickey to make those trades, but what I do know and what we all know is that he showed incredible courage in doing so. He answered a personal call. He answered the call of his nation with dignity and honor. It's only fitting today in his neighborhood that we again remember and memorialize his service and ultimate sacrifice to his country. May this marker remind us and the children and adults of this neighborhood as they ride their bikes, they walk to nearby stores, run to the park, laugh, enjoy cookouts in their backyards, that they are free to do so because of young men like Jim Hickey. We offer to his family our heartfelt condolences and our promises to never forget Private First Class James P. Hickey, United States Marine Corps. Thank you.
Senator, thank you very much. We appreciate that. John, Christine. Zamie, you gonna help them, my friend? 45 years. It's official today. The PFC James P. Hickey Square, Ellis and Robinson Street. We're gonna put that flag on the. I'd just like to say thank you to a few people who are here. My good friend from the president of the Korean War Memorial, John W. Butch Mahoney. Butch, thank you for being here. I know my color guards, they'll all be thanked as we further go along, and also our elected officials. But this is the ceremony at 33 Ellis Street. Was that White House over there where they were born and raised? And all of that. We also have our guest speaker here, Judge McMahon is somewhere around. We'll be hearing from him at the marina. I want to publicly thank Quincy Access TV for being with us today, and also the Quincy Sun. If there are any other media out there, can you let me know, and I will get it at the next square. Thank you. That closes our little book for James Hickey. Corporal Lawrence E. Soroy, United States Marine Corps, born 7/10/48. Unfortunately, 20 years later, on 11/24/1968, he was killed in the former Republic of South Vietnam. Lawrence, or Bucket, went to St. Anne's, and he was a proud member and a graduate of 1967 North Quincy High School Red Raiders. There's an awful lot of them here today. They're all welcoming one another. There's not much you can say after 45 years, but I found a piece put on the virtual wall by one of Larry's cousins. It's dated June 10, 2006. Corporal Lawrence E. Soroy, nickname was Bucket. To this day, I still don't know why. To me, he was my cousin Larry. He was handsome, had quite a personality. The gift ran in the family. When I visited my cousins, they would have me play sport games upstairs or out in the backyard. Always let me win. Kind of full of hell and lots of laughs. He was killed on November 24, 1968 in Operation Mead River in the Dodge City area of Da Nang. It was devastating for his family. I can still hear taps being played and the gun salute like it was yesterday. We all went on with our lives, but it would have been a better world if Bucket was still here with us. It's from his cousin, who unfortunately has passed away. People don't forget. You might think that they do. They don't. We didn't forget. We tracked them down. We followed them. The help of some people. Good people. People care about veterans. And when people say the veterans aren't getting their due respect, look around. I think Vietnam guys are getting them. Took us 44 years, but here we are. So with this, and we're going to move along, I would like to introduce to you Lawrence Bucket Soroy's brother, Jack Soroy. He's from upstate New York. Jack, would you care to say a few words, pal?
I'll make it short and sweet.
That's all right.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, fellow veterans. Give me a moment here to get this together. And if I can keep it together, we should be okay. The Soroy family's ultimate sacrifice came on the fourth generation of military warriors who served their country as part of an operating force somewhere for the last century, with pride, honor, and dedication. So that liberty isn't just another word that's used loosely, and Semper Fi means something to our troops, to their values, and our way of life. freedom isn't free. And for all those men and women who went into battle and came home, I believe in heroes. And I salute you. And to all of those who have fallen, I say God bless. You're not forgotten now and never will be. Here in Quincy, due to the outstanding response from people like Larry Norton, Jerry Mullen, that have made it their mission to make sure that heroes are remembered. I thank you for your loyalty, devotion, and perseverance. I have always trusted in action, not words. So let's take a moment to honor our fallen heroes who have served in the armed forces both past and present. I would like to thank all of you here today watching this dedication of a fallen hero whose main mission in life on November 24th, 1968 was survival and the defense of his country's principles. And life goes on, and so do we. Once again, thank you for this opportunity to honor Corporal Lawrence E. Soroy, United States Marine Corps. Fuck it, my brother, my hero. I salute you.
Hoorah!
Hoo-yah! Thank you.
John, you're welcome. Thank you. Well, our guest speakers today, from Ward 5, Councilor Kirsten Hughes. Kirsten's also the chairwoman of the Massachusetts State Republican Party. She is also chair of the Veterans Committee here in Quincy. And when we have problems, we go to Kirsten, and Kirsten squares them away. And she does a fantastic job. There isn't a veteran in this city who doesn't appreciate the work that she does for us. Kirsten, would you care to say a few words, please?
Thank you, Larry. Thank
Thanks,
you.
son.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here today. I'm always humbled to be at these ceremonies and asked to speak. I was remarking with Representative Chan that Larry was a graduate of St. Anne's School, as I am, as is Representative Chan, and I think that that's the important takeaway of today, is that these folks who we honor at these ceremonies and throughout the year were people with important, amazing lives that were ended too soon. And I certainly can add nothing of importance to what we're doing here today, but I am proud to be here and to honor the service along with my colleagues in government of Corporal Soroy. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Kristen, thank you, hon. Our next guest speaker is my good friend, my state representative from the 2nd Norfolk District, Mr. Tacky Chan. Tack? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you for the privilege of allowing me to speak today on a wonderful man that will not be forgotten. Corporal Soroy is a true hero that protects our freedoms, so we can actually be here today to talk about the wonderful lives that we have and to spend time with friends and family. And the beautiful thing about these postings on these corners is they're in our neighborhoods. They're not in a central location, other locations. I know we have the wall in Marina Bay, which is important. But this also is a great reminder of our own neighbors, of our own friends who were here, who were defending our country and protecting all our freedoms. And more importantly, he was always one of us. He's a neighbor, he's a brother, he's a friend. He's the guy that let everybody win, as seen on the virtual post. And I think that's the most important thing. So thank you very much for this wonderful day, and be well and God bless America.
Thanks, Tack. Mr. Connors, Mr. Nicholson, will you please place the wreath in honor of Corporal Lawrence E. Soroy, United States Marine Corps. Fire and detail. Chaps, Mr. LaFleur. Mr. Nasib Mo Murad.
My country 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountain side, let freedom ring. Our fathers' God, to thee, author of liberty, to thee we sing. Long may our land be bright with freedom's holy light. Protect us from thy might, great God, our King.
Thank you, Mo. Jack, with you, your family, all of Soroy's, will you please unveil the Corporal Lawrence E. Soroy Memorial Square? Quincy's son and Bobby Noble, you want to take some pictures here? And
Larry, I say one thing for the family.
what?
I want to say one thing for the family.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. I'm the pastor of Union Congregational Church, the church you pass on the way down here. My father was a carpenter, and carpenters are big into right-angle squares. From this square to the altar in our church, named after a veteran of World War I, Raymond B. Melendi, to the square in the corner of Hancock Street and Beach Street, also named for him. And for the family, we're a neighborhood church. I will say to you, as long as I'm pastor of this church, anytime we have flowers on the altar, the flowers will be placed at the foot of the sign. Honor your sacrifice.
Just a quick thing. Tonight, when you say your prayers, you remember the 3 Marines from Quincy that paid the ultimate sacrifice. On 24 November, with Corporal Soroy, Corporal Charles T. Nally, Steubenville, Ohio, From a hotel company, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, 2nd Lieutenant David F. Garringer from San Francisco, California, and a Silver Star recipient. Lance Corporal Thomas L. Peterson, Vancouver, Washington. PFC John J. Malix from Lynn, Massachusetts. And Hospital Corpsman Michael J. Ramber from Chula Vista, California. We can say our prayers. We have a right to assemble. We have a right to say anything we want. I hope you get that right, President Putin, because Marines are not going to quit. We're going to be with the little guy from now until it all ends. Thank you. Dedicate this square in honor of Lance Corporal Martin R. Keefe, United States Marine Corps. Martin was born on 12/29/48. Unfortunately, he was deceased on 2/23/69. And he is another 1967 class, North Quincy High School Red Raiders, which, again, we have an awful lot of them with us today. Also with us today is Catherine Keefe Miller, a sister, Michael Miller, a brother, Kelly Keefe, a niece. And we also have a cousin of his, Mark Keefe, who's been a friend of ours for many, many years, another combat veteran out of Vietnam. So with that, I am going to ask that the Ward 6 Councilor, Brian McNamee, to say a few words to his fellow North Quincy Red Raiders. Brian?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Larry. I want to thank Larry Norton and the Vietnam veterans for this honor. I also want to recognize what an honor it is for me to remember Lance Corporal Martin Keefe today. I'm often not very comfortable at these veterans functions. I'm not a veteran. I kind of believe that, like a child at a wedding, a politician should probably be seen but not heard at these ceremonies. So I'm going to be brief. We who live today by chance may end our days in some place, meriting no praise. We need, however, remember one thing. Those who have given their lives through their heroic deeds will always be honored by their friends. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Hillary Clinton wrote a book that said it takes a village to raise a child. I think it takes Ward 6 to recognize a true American hero. Thank you, Brian. Also with us today, he's going to say a few words, is your state representative, Bruce Ayers, from the 1st Norfolk District. Bruce? Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Larry. And I want to bring the greetings from the Massachusetts House of Representatives. And I'd like to thank all the Vietnam combat veterans and armed forces for giving me the opportunity to speak here today and for their commitment to honoring our fallen comrades from the city of Quincy. For the family and friends of Lance Corporal Martin Russell, thank you for sharing this special day with us. Freedom has never been free. This belief resonates strongly in the hearts of our nation's veterans. For those who have put their lives on the line for our country, freedom has a special meaning for many of us we will never know. As we pay homage here today to our veterans, we are here to acknowledge a brave Vietnam veteran and dedicate this memorial square to Lance Corporal Martin Russell Keefe. I had an opportunity to speak with Martin's sister, Kathy, this morning at breakfast, and she told me how Martin always wanted to be a Marine while growing up and to serve his country. Right after high school, he joined the Marines, and Martin, like many of our heroes, put his life on the line while defending our country. He was killed on a mission while looking for the enemy. Martin was a North Quincy High School Red Raider who graduated in 1967. Like many of us who grew up in North Quincy, he played in these neighborhoods, participated in sports in the school, and it was a well-rounded young man. As we honor these heroes, whether it's a flag or dedication plaque, these are all but symbols of our city's commitment to never forget the sacrifices of our fallen heroes and their families. I believe this dedication captures the memories, the courage, and the commitment and the sacrifices of this hero. Today, the return of our soldiers gets due fanfare. People honor them for their service and commitment to our country. Unfortunately, there are times in our nation's history when our veterans didn't return home to this warm welcome. As we all know, Vietnam veterans that returned home never received a parade, a thank you, or a hero's welcome, which they truly deserve. The city of Quincy is very fortunate to have so many committed veterans who have fought for our country only to return home and get involved with veterans posts to support our local veterans and the community. As I look out here this afternoon, I see so many members from the veterans posts within my legislative district. The Nickerson Post, the Caddy Post, the Morissette Post. All these veterans posts give so much back to the community. I believe this says a lot about the dedication of the posts, as well as the character of the people who get involved in the principles and values we share together towards our veterans. I was never drafted. I never had to fight a war because of the many sacrifices here that you all made. As a legislator, I strongly believe, and I've stated this before, that our veterans fight the real battles. They should not have to be expected to return home and fight the bureaucratic battles for health care, employment opportunities, and housing. These are the core commitments that I've advocated for on Beacon Hill. Massachusetts is #1 in the country for supporting our veterans, and we're proud of that. Our Quincy delegation, although we don't always agree on everything, nor should we, but when it comes to veterans issues, Majority Leader Ron Mariano, Representatives Taki Chan, Dan Hunt, as well as Senator John Keaton, work diligently to provide for our veterans and their families. We recently passed the Valor Act II, which expands veteran services. This law establishes a home modification program for the disabled veterans, a post-deployment council that supports programs for our veterans transitioning back into civilian life, and it provides incentives for companies to hire our veterans and their spouses. These are just a few of the provisions in this legislation to support our veterans. I was proud to work with the delegation on passing this bill, and I'm proud to be here with you this afternoon. In closing, I want to thank you again for giving me the invitation to speak here. I'm proud to gather with you as we honor Martin Keith. Martin is another example of the brave men and women that have served our country since the fight for democracy began. Our city is filled with a lot of history and pride. This afternoon, as we gather here to dedicate this street corner in memory of our hometown hero, Martin Keith, who died fighting for our country, is another great example of that history and pride. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, State Representative Ayers. Speaking for the Keith family is Christine McSherry. Christine?
Starting off as a very early morning. I'm going to apologize ahead of time if I get too long or too emotional. Today has been very hard for me. My family, all of us here, my mom, my uncle, my cousins, my sons, we were born and bred here in Quincy, right across the street at 222 Billings Road, in that big white house. And even though we have moved to different parts of the country, in different cities and towns, today is a day that I've never felt so proud to have been born in Quincy and to continue to call it my home, no matter where I go in the world. I want to thank all of you for giving my family, myself, my sons, the next generation, an opportunity to reflect on what all these men have done, those who have lost their lives and those who continue to be with us here today. My grandparents would have been so proud if they were still alive. I still remember the times when my grandmother was taken out of the house after she lost her son. She was in shock. Marty was my uncle. He was also my godfather. When I was 4 years old, he died. So my memories of him are mostly just impressions. But I do remember that he was a big, gentle man with big hands and really big feet. There's a scene I associate with him when I think about it. I was sitting in the living room in that house in a big wingtip type chair, and there was a man there wearing fatigues, and I sat in his lap. It could have been my uncle, or it could have been a Marine friend, like any of you, who came by to pay his respects to my family. Although my memories of him are very brief, he reminds me often of my youngest son, Tabor, reminds me of my uncle. Tabor's now 16, and I imagine that he is a lot like my uncle was. Big-hearted, loving, and affectionate. My mother has all sorts of memories of my uncle. They grew up together in Howes Neck and then moved here to Billings Road. They raided vegetable gardens and had tomato fights with the spoils. They brought home a stray dog named Muggsy that used to sleep in the middle of Billings Road. They convinced my grandmother to keep him. My uncle would climb the rose trellises on the house after a night of underage drinking, and sometimes he didn't make it in. He would fall off. Although there's such lighthearted memories, there's also something sad about them. They're all recollections from a childhood and adolescence. There are no memories of his wedding day, or of him doting on his first child or grandchild, showing off his new home that he worked hard to afford, because none of those things ever happened. His life ended at 20 in Vietnam on a recon mission with 2 friends they enlisted with from Quincy as well. They were all killed by friendly fire. My grandmother never got over the death of her youngest child. Her life here in Quincy and on Billings Road reminded her too much of Marty. So her and my grandfather escaped. They moved to Florida to get away from the pain. I can't help but imagine how my grandmother felt, but I actually live with a little bit of that pain every day. My son, Jet, who's 18 years old, has something called Duchenne muscular dystrophy. The life expectancy, ironically enough, is 20 for young men with Duchenne. It affects only males. So you can understand how the parallels today have really come into my life. The good news is we got some incredible news from the FDA earlier this week. And I couldn't help but wonder, why was I getting the news this week? And why, after 45 years of my uncle, my godfather, dying? Why is this all happening today? Well, I think my godfather and my uncle is speaking to me from the heavens. He's telling me what it's like to be a Marine, to get up every day and fight for my child, just like he fought for me and gave me the opportunity to stand and fight for Jet and for all the other little boys. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you, and I thank my uncle for giving me, my cousin, my mom, my uncle, and my sons and my daughters the freedom to fight for what we believe in. And all of you here today, I can't thank you enough. I hope that this provides my mom and my uncle, Michael, with some closure for something that was open and wounded 45 years ago. Thank you.
I knew you could do it. I knew you could do it. Commander Charles L. Hurd, Commander of the Quincy Veterans Council from American Legion Post 294, and Richard Keene, Senior Vice Commander, Disabled American Veterans 79. Will you please place the wreath at Lance Corporal Martin R. Keith, United States Marine Corps Square. Firing detail. Taps Mr. LaFleur. Mr. Murad.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber ways of grain, for purple mountains, majesties, above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee and crown thy goods with brotherhood from a sea to shining sea.
Mr. Murad, thank you, sir. With the family of Martin R. Keefe, Lance Corporal, United States Marine Corps. Please step forward. Well, Mr. Steven Sambruno, from the Quincy Parks Department. It's official, Lance Corporal Martin R. Keefe Square. Little windy, huh? I don't hear any complaints from my 84-year-old Gold Star mother. Stop complaining. A great day to be alive. Any day on this side of the grass is good. With that, I'd like to introduce, a nice round of applause to my good friend Charlie Towers, the next Department Commander of the American Legion, 2014-2015. Standing next to him, combat wounded United States Army Vietnam veteran James Fratellillo, National Historian of the American Legion. I want to welcome you all here today. My name is Lawrence M. Norton, and I am President of Vietnam Combat Veterans Combined Armed Forces. This is my 27th year of doing this, and every time it's a challenge. Today it's the wind. 3 years ago it was the wind, but we remember when there was snow, and we used to have to call and have them shovel us out and march. But here are two beautiful young ladies who are Gold Star mothers, and they're well into their age. I haven't heard one of them complain about the wind, the cold, or anything else. So I don't want to hear it from my brother Marines. We are here today to honor not just the 48 that are behind me, but we had 3 special Marines. How they became, we don't know. We just picked the names. They were Marines. Sometimes it's Air Force, Army. You know, this year we're Marines. It's Private First Class James P. Hickey, Corporal Lawrence E. Soroy, Lance Corporal Martin R. Keefe. Those are our special people this year. They're special every year, every day. But today is a little bit better. Today, they're going to be remembered in the City of Presidents for as long as we're around. That's very important. So with that, we're going to have the invocation by my good friend, Reverend John Carl Swanson, pastor of the Union Congregational Church. And Reverend Jack is a former lieutenant. Now, don't hold it against him. United States Navy. Reverend Jack.
Thank you, Larry. The experience this morning is really, really weird. Larry, at the first dedication of the Hickey Square, Larry pulled out Life magazine, and it was the issue where they mentioned 1 week's dead in Vietnam. And it just struck me because I remember that issue. I remember being 10 years old, dating myself now, and I remember being on my parents out on the porch in West Quincy. I'm a West Quincy rat, and I was playing with my Army men. And I remember clearly my mother with that magazine and saying, "Jackie, these are your Army men." And at the time, I think I was really kind of, weird. But looking back at it now, of course, she had seen that magazine and she had saw all those pictures. And she sees her little boy playing with his Army men on the porch. And it just reminds me just the fact that, and it's again said this morning, these are not names in granite. These are people. These were kids. And we honor them today, and by extension, we honor all veterans. So with that, let's pray together. Father, thank you for blessing us with this beautiful day. And thank you, Lord, for blessing us with this nation, and also for the 48 and the legions of other 48s, those who gave the last full measure for freedom and who have enabled us to gather here today. Let us ever remember them. Let's remember the words in the Apocrypha that says, "Many men die and leave a name for themselves, but many more do not, and it is as if they had never been born. Yet they shall be remembered from generation to generation for the deeds of fidelity and mercy." Bless, O Lord, these proceedings. Respecting all faiths, I pray in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Jack. To sing the Star-Spangled Banner. Unfortunately, Officer John Sutter could not be here, so I asked my good friend Nasib Mo Murad if he'd pinch hit, and he said he would. Mr. Murad, please, sir. And also join in.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watch were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in the air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land and of the free and the home of the brave.
That's my good friend Mo Murad. I'm going to skip some of the dignitaries. I'm going to ask Kirsten to do that. Everybody be happy. But the next gentleman I'm going to introduce is the Chief Executive Officer of our beloved city of Quincy, the Honorable Thomas P. Koch. Mayor Koch, who has gone completely out of his way. That's why they're all here today. The bikes, all the veterans organizations. We're proud to stand here with Mayor Koch, who goes out of his way, I'm telling you. You guys only knew. And I appreciate it, Tommy.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you, sir.
Greetings, everybody. It's certainly an honor and privilege for me to bring greetings of the city, Reverend clergy, my colleagues in government, distinguished veterans, Gold Star mothers, Gold Star families, and particularly the families of the Sorori family, the Hickey family, the Keefe family, who we honored their loved ones this morning at various squares throughout the city. A warm welcome to you. And as Mayor Kirsten Hughes said it earlier at one of the squares, it truly is humbling and somewhat daunting when you're in a room full of veterans. You certainly don't feel worthy to be at the microphone, but by the veteran service and by what has happened historically, it's allowed me to be at the microphone. I spoke to Tom Kiley not long ago, local attorney, graduated North Quincy High School, Harvard University, went into the Vietnam War and was shot up very badly, was left for dead. And Tom survived, but had a lot of issues that he dealt with and overcame. And I asked him one day, how come you haven't spoken at one of these events, Tom? He says, well, you wouldn't want to hear what I have to say about war. And I said, Tom, you earned the right to say whatever you want to say about war. I'm from that spoiled generation when the veterans earn the right so that we can enjoy that right each and every day in this country. And I'm so grateful. And I know I speak on behalf of my colleagues and speak on behalf of the citizens of Quincy. Thank you to our veterans. We will never forget. God bless the veterans, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We appreciate that. Congressman Stevie Lynch couldn't be here, and my understanding is that Senator Keenan is caught in traffic. So we're going to have a pinch hitter. He's from the 1st Norfolk District. His name is Bruce Ayers. Bruce, would you please bring the greetings from the State House, buddy? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Larry.
Appreciate that.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. As Larry alluded to, I want to bring the official greetings for the Massachusetts House of Representatives. On behalf of my colleagues, Majority Leader Ron Mariano, Representative Chan, and Hunt, and of course Senator John Keenan, we were all proud to participate in the day's activities earlier. I can speak for my colleagues when we all vote up on Beacon Hill. Although we may not agree on everything at Beacon Hill, nor should we, but when it comes to veterans, I think we all share the same philosophy that our veterans fight the real battles. They should not have to return home and fight bureaucratic battles for housing, health care, and employment. And that's what we tried to do up on Beacon Hill and will continue to do on Beacon Hill. And it's a pleasure to be here today as we honor our veterans, and I want to thank the Quincy Vietnam veterans for all they do to dedicate and memorialize our real heroes. Thank you very much.
Senator, we didn't take your spot, sir. Come on up. You sure? John, I love you. Thank you. It's cold. Next gentleman doesn't really need to be introduced. He's a Quincy resident, lives in Washington, D.C. Brother's name is on the wall. Happens to be the first name on the wall. Mr. Robert J. Brudno, United States Navy. Bob.
I've been coming here to Marina Bay each year for 9 years now. First was to honor my brother Alan, whose name was finally added to the clock tower in 2005. Then it was to help make sure that all 48 of these brave men received their long overdue welcome home. Each year I've spoken and I've opened my heart to you all. It's not easy telling my brother's story and reliving his tragic loss, but it was something that I had to do to make sure that everything possible was done to help servicemen and women who returned from war, all wars, to get the help they need and the gratitude that they earned. I'm quite capable of telling stories without notes, but I read my remarks today because, to be honest, I don't know when I'm going to be overcome by memories and lose my place. I'll do so again today, but hopefully for the last time. No, it's not the last time that I'm going to be coming here, but hopefully the last time I'll be talking about the pain of loss. It's pretty cheeky of me to come here and to tell any of you veterans how to deal with a war that continues to bind us together. I'm just going to tell you how one person has found a way to end that war in his mind. Hopefully, you can find peace of mind in your own way. Last fall, I was sitting with friends on the shore of the Chesapeake Bay on a beautiful evening, watching a magnificent sunset. It was one of those absolutely perfect, peaceful moments that are so hard to find nowadays. One of my guests, who is not a veteran and knew little of my brother's story, asked me, "Is there anything that could make this moment better?" Without any hesitation or forethought, I immediately replied, "Yes, it would be great if I could have my brother Alan with me." In an instant, I effortlessly pulled down the dark curtain of sadness that had always been within easy reach for the past 40 years. That happy moment was gone for good for me and my guests, and inevitably led to telling my brother's tragic story yet again. So my guest said to me, "He's a ghost. I can see him behind you. You have to let him go." No one has ever said that to me before. Well, maybe they have, but I sure wasn't listening. This time, I heard it. No one could be more angry than me. I've spent the past 4 decades, being angry at my country and how people failed my brother, who survived 7.5 years as a prisoner of war, but was left to succumb to the ravages of PTSD, only 4 months after he came home. I've been angry at those who mistreated all of us who were in uniform back then. And when I return to Quincy every year, I find good company among others who also cannot forget those slights. But at that moment, I finally realized what I've been doing to myself and my loved ones, who have witnessed what has become a ritual. For 40 years, here's how I introduced myself. My name is Bob Bredno. My brother was a prisoner of war for 7.5 years, and he took his own life after only 4 months of freedom. That's who I became. To strangers, I would say this quickly and get to tell my brother's tragic story once again. It took nothing for me to pull this out. The reaction, of course, was instant sympathy, which opened the door to my telling your story, too. How Vietnam veterans came home to a country which did not value their service. I've actually been angry for 49 years, since October 18, 1965, when my brother's F-4 was shot down over North Vietnam. Angry at fellow Americans for not supporting our POWs and other servicemen and women during that lousy war. Angry at a military that was so unprepared to help my brother, as well as thousands of other wounded servicemen. I don't know about you, but I thought it was a life sentence. So on that fall day last year, I realized that I actually had a choice. I can run out the clock this way, or maybe I could find peace of mind that has eluded me for so long. I return here to Quincy today, to this sacred place, and am willing to open up these wounds yet again in front of you all, because I believe that many of you Vietnam veterans can also find well-deserved peace of mind in the time that you have left. I finally woke up because of the simple advice of a stranger. We can cast off this anger and bury it once and for all if we choose to. If not for ourselves, then do it for our loved ones and our friends who for years would not dare ask us to do so. It's time for us to simply feel proud of what we did and stop wallowing in the anger. It's time to go cold turkey. I have found a way, and by sharing this deeply personal experience, I hope that many of you will find a path to happiness in the short time that we have left on this earth. It's not easy, but we can stop ourselves from saying to strangers, I'm a Vietnam veteran and then fill in the blank with your wounds or your demons and all of the anger. Sure, the empathy flows. Thank you for your service comes easily today from Americans. We define ourselves as victims sometimes. The answer can be found right here. It took a while, but our country began to join us in recognizing the service of all of those who fought in that thankless war. By remembering the dead, whose names are engraved on the clock tower here, by telling the story of each of these men and how they lived, instead of just that they died, we, in a small way, have set an example for others in this country. We've taught them to give Vietnam veterans their long overdue welcome home. And I think it's time for us to feel better. If we don't ease off, what about our own, even if we do ease off, what about our own personal losses? Can we find a way to let go of the sadness and the anger that accompany us every day without forgetting the fallen? Absolutely. It's just time for us to accept what happened and enjoy our sunsets without guilt. Just ask my wife. Your families will be happier with you around. I have no regrets about voicing my anger. It got my brother's name added to the Vietnam Memorial and to this clock tower. It got people thinking about how they treated Vietnam veterans when they came home. Sure, there was a cost, but it was worth it. Today, 9 years after I first came here, I now believe that there's a way for us to help ourselves while not forgetting the fallen and the injured with whom we served. It's up to us. Every year, Tom Melinda stands in front of you and says, I'm Tom Melinda and I have PTSD. I think it's time for him to say, I'm Tom Melinda and I'm a proud grandfather, and some people think I'm a saint. Back in Washington, one of my business partners is a Marine and a wounded Vietnam veteran. I asked him once why he wasn't as angry as I was. And he said, I refuse to be a victim. That's good advice. So it's time for all of us to let the war end. Our country really does appreciate our service and regrets that it didn't support us when it most needed it. It has taken a long time, but look at what Vietnam veterans have done. We have truly paid it forward. America has rallied behind a new generation of veterans from Afghanistan and Iraq in ways that we could never have imagined years ago. And even if our fellow Americans disagree with the wars, they support those who are sent to fight them. Hopefully, as a result of what we have done, no other generation of service member will experience what we did. We have done a lot of good here. We have made sure that none of Quincy's 48 fallen was forgotten. Let's continue to honor them year after year, but it's time to cut ourselves some slack. Last fall, I finally realized that I wanted to tell my brother's tragic story because it allowed me to be sad and angry. So I quit cold turkey, and so can you. So enjoy the respect of your countrymen and the fellow veterans for a job well done, and enjoy the time that you have left. And as always, on behalf of my family and other families of those you honor here each year, I want to thank you for the great job that you've done for us. Thank you.
Here's a good friend of mine. She's chairwoman of Massachusetts State Republican Party. She's a Ward 5 city councilor, and she also Madam Chairman of the Quincy Veterans Council, Kirsten Hughes. Kirsten, hun?
Thank you, Larry. It's a pleasure to be serving as the chairman of the Quincy Veterans Council on behalf of the City Council. And I would like to recognize my vice chair, Ward 3 Councilor Kevin Coughlin, who has been here with us since this morning. So thank you, Kevin. Again, this is always a fantastic day, and my thanks to not only Larry Norton, but the whole of the Quincy Veterans Council. It's a pleasure and an honor, and I learned so much from serving with you every year since I've been on the council, so thank you. I would like to recognize my colleagues in government who are here and who have been with us throughout the day. Councilor at Large, I see Doug Guttrow. Council President Joe Finn. Councilor at Large Mike McFarland. Ward 3 Councilor, of course, Kevin Coughlin. Ward 6 Councilor Brian McNamee. And regards from Councilor Margaret LaForest, Brad Kroll, and Brian Palmucci, who could not be with us today. Also representing Quincy School Committee, Paul Brigoli, Kathy Hubley, Barbara Isola, Noel DeBona, Ann Mahoney, and Dave McCarthy. Thank you very much for all of your support and attention to these very important men today, and women. Thank you.
My good friend, Sergeant Thomas A. Belinda, United States Marine Corps, retired. Tommy?
Yes, I am Tom Belinda. I am a proud grandfather, but the PTSD will have to talk to the VA about that. Vietnam Combat Veterans Combined Armed Forces, Quincy, have been conducting this ceremony since 1987. We formed in 1986 in the back room of the high rise, and we watched a film called Letters Home from Vietnam, written by my dear friend over here, Bernie Edelman. Thank you, Bernie. Our intent was to honor all Vietnam veterans, was to recognize the long-suffering Gold Star families, and it was to remember these men. And I hope we've done that. So I want to thank to the guys that started this thing. John McDonough, Kevin Gibbons, Dee Larson, Jerry Nickel, Joe Brooker, Colonel Ed Murphy, Larry Connors, and Dick Churchill for what we started here. And a special thanks to Larry Norton, who has put his heart and soul into this thing for the last 27 years. In light of Bob's comments, and in light of the fact that next year we'll have honored everyone on this wall, this will be the last time I wear these. And these boots. Now it is my sad duty and great honor to introduce the Gold Star families present here today. Before I do that, I want to mention that we have a World War II POW in front of us here, Bob Nova. I'd like to give him a round of applause if I could. Two of my favorite Gold Star mothers, Christine Devlin, whose son was killed in Beirut, and Terry Davis. Terry knows about sacrifice. Her son, Specialist 4th Class Richard Davis, a Green Beret, recipient of the Silver Star. And Terry is the past president of the Gold Star Mothers of America, as is Christine. And she rides in Rolling Thunder every year. Terry also lost her husband, a career Army serviceman, in a training accident. So she knows about sacrifice. My favorite Gold Star dad, Salvatore Sal Puglisi. He's the father of Specialist 4th Class David Puglisi, United States Army. David was seriously wounded and survived for 19 years in a chair. In large part because of the loving care given by the Puglisi family, Sal, Effie, Bob, and Stephen. David was awarded the Bronze Star with a V for Valor. They are a great American family. Patty Smith and her husband Bill, sister and brother-in-law of Peter Gary, and also Peter's other sister Linda is here. Peter was an Army medic. He's the 39th man from Quincy to be killed in Vietnam. He was only 18 years old. Lieutenant Mike Granahan of the Quincy Fire Department. Mike is a Army Vietnam veteran. His wife Karen, he's a brother and a sister-in-law of Lance Corporal John Granahan. John Granahan, United States Marine Corps. John was just 19 years old when he was killed. He was trying to save some other Marines. Also today, it was Michael Jr., who just was recently discharged from the Marine Corps, and his lifelong dream is to follow in his father's footsteps in the Quincy Fire Department. Mr. Mayor? You can help that out there. Dana and Taylor Ahern, brothers of Lance Corporal Brian Ahern, United States Marine Corps, who was only 18 years old when he was killed. Last year we lost former Captain Mark Ahern, who was the 4th brother, and all served in the Marine Corps. A patriotic family. Buddy Pitts, Marine Vietnam veteran, brother of PFC David Fitz, United States Marine Corps. David was only 18 years old when he was killed. But he also lost a second brother, Stephen. Stephen was also a Marine Vietnam veteran. And he lost his life, he lost his battle to PTSD. Robert Brudno, dear friend and Navy veteran. Stephen Brudno, brothers of Captain Alan Brudno, who we've heard about today, was one of the longest held prisoners of war in American history. Alan was the recipient of the Distinguished Flying Cross, 2 Silver Stars, 2 Bronze Stars, and 2 Purple Hearts. And the Gold Star families of this year's honorees. John Hickey, Christine Hickey Silcox, brother and sister of PFC James Hickey, United States Marine Corps. And there are also many members of other members of the family here present. Jim's picture was in Life magazine as they published the pictures of those killed in action for 1 week's time. There were 242 pictures in the Life magazine that year, and Jim was one of them. He was only 19 years old. John Jack Saroy, brother of Corporal Lawrence E. Saroy, United States Marine Corps. Larry was killed on 24 November 1968 during Operation Mead River in a place called Dodge City in Quang Nam Province. He served with Hotel 27. I served with Echo 27. And was wounded 2 days before he was killed. Our guest speaker today, George McMahon, is a captain. And he spent many months in the Dodge City area, the Arizona Territory, the Quezon Mountains. And this area was such a hotbed of enemy action that we received the Presidential Unit Citation and the Meritorious Unit Commendation for the summer of '68. It was a brutal place. The enemy wished to take the Da Nang airfield, which they never did because the Marines were protecting the jungle and the mountains around it. Michael Keefe, Catherine Keefe Miller, Christine McSherry, Kelly Keefe, brothers, sisters, and niece of Lance Corporal Martin R. Keefe, United States Marine Corps. Martin served in the elite 3rd Force Recon. Those men were tough as nails. I like to think all Marines are tough as nails, but those guys were exceptional. In Operation Houston, my company was dropped on top of a mountain because a 4-man team was surrounded by a battalion of North Vietnamese. The wounded recon sergeant insisted that he would be the point man as we fought our way down the mountain. And those are what the recon do. So with that, I had a lot more things to say, but I'll just save them for another time. I want to thank you all for coming here. We hope we've done what we're supposed to do. God bless you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Tom. Our guest of honor today is Attorney George C. McMahon, Captain, United States Marine Corps, retired. Attorney George McMahon was born in New Britain, Connecticut. He attended local schools and graduated from the Canterbury School in 1964. Mr. McMahon attended Providence College and graduated in 1968. While in college, Mr. McMahon joined the Marine Corps platoon leader course and spent 2 college summers in boot camp at Quantico. Upon graduating from college, Attorney McMahon was commissioned to 2nd Lieutenant, was given orders to Quantico, Virginia, to attend the Marine Corps Basic School for Officers. As a platoon commander, and was subsequently sent to the Defense Department Language School in Monterey, California. Lieutenant McMahon spent 11 months at the language school studying the Vietnamese language. He remains fluent in the Vietnamese language to this day. After graduating school, First Lieutenant McMahon was sent to Vietnam, where he became the infantry platoon commander of 3rd Battalion, 3rd Platoon, 1st Battalion, 5th Marines. As a former 5th Marine, I should have known that. After 1.5 months in country, Lieutenant McMahon took over Delta Company. He became commanding officer and was wounded. Just before Lieutenant McMahon took over the 3rd Platoon of Delta Company, the platoon had been commanded by Lieutenant James Webb, now U.S. Senator from Virginia and a former U.S. Secretary of Navy under President Ronald Reagan. Lieutenant McMahon's 3rd Platoon was the subject of Senator Webb's first novel, Fields of Fire. Recounts battles and locations where Mr. McMahon and Senator Webb fought. Senator Webb and Mr. McMahon remain close friends today. During Lieutenant McMahon's last 2 months in Vietnam, his company was assigned to become the Airborne Attack Company for the 1st Marine Division. This involved responding by helicopter insurgents of Delta Company to enemy positions, contacts anywhere in the 1st Marine Division area of responsibility. As a result of the Vietnam tour, Lieutenant McMahon was awarded the Combat Action Ribbon, Bronze Star, Combat V, the Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry, Distinguished Flying Cross. Mr. McMahon is the only Marine infantry officer to win the Distinguished Flying Cross in the Vietnam War. Upon leaving the Marine Corps, Mr. McMahon entered Suffolk Law School, Boston, Massachusetts, and received a law degree in 1971. In December of '74, he was admitted to the Massachusetts Bar and has practiced criminal and trial law in the Boston area. During his legal career, he has served in a number of capacities, including 4 years as a federal prosecutor in the United States Attorney's Office in Boston. He also taught criminal trial tactics and trial advocacy center at the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. Attorney McMahon has also served as legislative assistant to the Speaker of the Massachusetts House of Representatives, co-counsel to the Special Legislative Committee of the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, co-counsel to the Massachusetts Legislative Committee on Experimental Medical Research, and a Massachusetts Special Assistant Attorney General on numerous occasions. Since 1985, Attorney McMahon has been practicing criminal trial law and is known for his participation in many high-profile criminal trials, both in the state and federal courts. Attorney McMahon has 2 daughters, a son, and 7 grandchildren, and he and his wife Marie reside in our beautiful city of Quincy. Ladies and gentlemen, a distinct honor and privilege to introduce to you Attorney George C. McMahon, Captain, United States Marine Corps Reserve, retired. Whew. Captain.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, friends, families, Vietnam veterans. I am humbled and I'm honored and proud to be here to honor these men whose names appear on this wall. Larry told you I was not born in Quincy. I grew up in Connecticut. But I didn't know when I came here, and I didn't know for many years after this wall went up, that I had a connection with someone on this wall, a close connection. I'll tell you about that in a minute. Larry asked me if I would try to think of anything I could think to say about the Vietnam War that was unique to that war as opposed to other wars that our country has been in. The things that I thought of most were the conduct and the nature of the war, being one, and then the attitude of the American people before, during, and after the war. Those are the things to me that jump out as being unique to the war that we participated in. We were told, regarding the conduct of the war, that this was a war having to do with what they call the domino theory, that we did not want the country of South Vietnam to fall to the communists of North Vietnam. That was a domino theory. We were going to go and we were going to save the people of South Vietnam and liberate that country. When we got there, and many of you here are well aware of this, we weren't allowed to win that war. We weren't allowed to cross into Laos and Cambodia and shut down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the trail that was resupplying our enemy throughout South Vietnam. We were not allowed to invade North Vietnam, which we could have done in a heartbeat. We weren't allowed to bomb in Haiphong Harbor or the railways that came into Hanoi that also resupplied our enemies in the south. I'm not a military genius, but a lot of the people that I serve with, and a lot of Vietnam veterans that I know who served in Vietnam, I think would agree that if we put our heart into what we were doing over there and our government let us do it, we could have overrun that country in 3 weeks. That's why it's such a shame it dragged out for so long and it was conducted the way it was with the political hijinks that were going on in Washington at the time. Make no mistake about it, Vietnam was an all-out war. The men whose names appear on this wall, the other veterans that are here, know that. The men who fought in Vietnam fought as hard as any Americans in any war in U.S. history. They lived in horrible conditions, living in holes in the ground for months on end, eating sea rations, had sores over their bodies, trench foot, monsoons that lasted for 3 and 4 months. Those are their living conditions, not to mention the fact that they were fighting a determined enemy in the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong. In Tet, 1968, the North Vietnamese, under the leadership of General Nguyen Vo Giap, attacked throughout South Vietnam and all over the country. It was a last-ditch effort because of the conduct of our American servicemen in bringing them almost to their knees. And after Tet, they were there. They were through. General Giap has said as much after the war. He said they were ready to throw in the towel. He said that we had beaten them. But then General Giap started reading the New York Times. And he started reading about the anti-war movements and massive protests in his country. He started reading about Woodstock and the counterculture. He started reading about the many, many, many young American males who fled the United States and went to Canada to escape the war and escape their obligation, an obligation that these men did not shrink. They took heart from that, and they held on. And we all know what the final result was. The attitude in the country at that time, and I'm not making any political judgments, but it was not good with respect to American servicemen or the Vietnam War. These men, before they went to Vietnam, knew that. They knew it when they were there. We all knew it. We all knew that we were not very popular and that our war was not very popular. And at the same time, our hands were being tied by our government in terms of fighting a true all-out war. These people who appear on this wall and the other American Vietnam veterans fought fiercely, and they were fiercely loyal to each other. We should be forever grateful to them. I hope you'll permit me a personal comment. I said that I didn't grow up in Quincy. I'm very proud to be a citizen of Quincy, especially when I see how Quincy treats her veterans. I didn't know the name Gary Webb. Didn't know Gary Webb. But there was a young Marine with me in February of 1970 in the Arizona Territory that Tom referenced. He was 19 years old, he was a corporal, he was probably the best Marine in my company. I was a company commander at that time, and we were on a patrol. Excuse me. I traveled at the point when the company traveled and patrolled. And it was usually just the point man in front of me, then the squad leader, his squad leader, and then me. And then I had a machine gun, an M60 behind me, and a radio behind that. We came to a stop when Dale Wilson, this 19-year-old from North Carolina, looked back at me and asked me, which way do we go? I knelt down, pulled out my bat, I looked, and I was still kneeling, and I pointed. He stood up so that the point man could see him, and he went like that. When he did, the world blew up. I got thrown about 10 feet in the air and about 20 feet backwards. He went straight up about 50 feet. When he came down, he didn't have two of his legs and one of his arms. I say that these men were fiercely loyal to each other. I got it together enough to get a medevac called in. And we're waiting for a Huey to come in and get Dale Wilson. And while that Huey was coming in, we started receiving enemy fire. I didn't give a command. I didn't have a chance to give a command. Members of my company went across that rice paddy, hell-bent for leather. They were taking fire, serious, heavy fire, and they never hesitated. They kept going, firing and shooting and attacking, until finally the North Vietnamese realized they were not going to be stopped. And they took off, and we got Wilson out. That night, I covered myself in my foxhole with a poncho. And I had a red flashlight, and I started to write a letter to his parents to tell them what an outstanding young man he was, what a great Marine he was. It took me 4 nights to write that letter. I don't know how many drafts I did, but I finally got it sent out to his parents. Subsequently, I left Vietnam. I never heard from Dale Wilson. I often thought that he knew that when I made that hand gesture and then he stood up where he was clearly visible to the enemy and made that hand gesture, that's when that mine, a command detonated mine, was set off. I often thought that it was meant for me, not him. I often felt guilty about it. And I thought that's why I never heard from him. I thought he might have been bitter about what happened. In 1979, I was working in the U.S. Attorney's office here in Boston. Jim Webb, who Larry mentioned, was a friend of mine. He then worked for the Department of Defense before he became Secretary of the Navy. Came to Boston. Now, Webb was the company commander before I was. He knew Gary Webb. He didn't know his name was on this wall down here. Neither did I. I didn't know Gary Webb. But Jim Webb asked me what I heard about some of the guys that we had with us in Vietnam, and he asked me, how's old Dale Wilson down in North Carolina? Well, the only thing I knew about Dale Wilson is I saw a little blurb in the New York Times in 1975 when President Carter declared the amnesty. It said that a veteran from Troutman, North Carolina, nailed his Bronze Star and Purple Heart to the wall of an outhouse and burned it down in protest. And it had Dale Wilson's name. I didn't have the guts to call him, now that I knew where he was. And I figured he didn't want to hear from me anyway. I underestimated that fierce loyalty that I talked about before. Webb said to me, Bronze Star, he said, I wrote him up for a Silver Star. Do you remember the night we were almost overrun on Gonoy Island? An island we call Football Island. And how he fired the M60 from his hip, cut down those people that were overrunning our position. I said, yeah, I remember that. Webb left town. 2 days later, I'm working in my office in Boston, and my secretary comes in and she says, excuse me, there's a guy named Dale Wilson on the phone who wants to talk to you. I broke out into a cold sweat, and I took that phone. And he said, Skipper, how you doing? How you been? Didn't know how to get a hold of you, didn't know where you were. Missed you. Want to see you. Want you to come down and come to our reunions with the platoon. We've had 3 of them. Will you please come down? We talk about healing here. We talk about what this city has given us in terms of recognition. That was the beginning of the healing for me. The healing that maybe Bob was talking about. I did go down to Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. Not until 1994, but I went down there. And that was the first time I saw Dale Wilson since I dumped him on that helicopter when he lost both his legs and his arm. When I left Vietnam, my company gave me a baseball cap. It had captain's bars and Marine Corps emblem. And had my call sign, my radio call sign, Grim Reaper Delta 6 on the side. I wore that hat from 1970 to 1994. It was beat up, but I brought it with me down there to North Carolina, or to Tennessee. And when Wilson were alone, he's the one that brought it up, and he says, you know, Skipper, I know you think that it was your fault what happened to me. Forget it. It could have been any of us. I've never felt that way about what happened that day, and I want you to know that. And I said to him, Dale, this hat is my most prized possession, and I want you to have it. And he said to me, you know what my most prized possession is? And I said, what? He's married, by the way, now, and he had grandchildren. Or children at that time. He said, my most prized possession is that 7-page letter you wrote to my parents when I was wounded. That's fiercely loyal. I brought Dale up here in 1994. We came out to this very spot, and I showed him this memorial. I was kind of surprised because I've been a lot of places, but I never saw a city that went so far out of its way to honor its veterans, particularly the Vietnam veterans. And Wilson looked up at that wall and he said, "You know that Gary Webb?" And I said, "No, I don't." He said, "Gary Webb was in my platoon shortly before I got there. That's why I never knew him. And because I didn't come from Quincy, I didn't know his family." But it turns out that Dale Wilson from North Carolina and Gary Webb were great friends. Turns out that Gary Webb was a member of my company before I was. As a result of seeing his name on there, we reached out, we found Webb's family, part of it down in Houston. There was a reunion of sorts between Dale and some of Gary's family, which I was very pleased and happy about. The Vietnam veterans here today, your families and friends, because families went through this too. I know mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers felt bad about the attitude that this country had while that war was going on and how some of our servicemen were treated. So we all went through this, but we knew before, and we knew during, and we knew after we came back from Vietnam that we would never receive the recognition that other servicemen in other wars received. That was unique to the Vietnam War. Speaking of unique, I'd just lastly like to say that, and I mentioned this, and many thanks to the mayor, because I just never knew anything like this existed, any group like this that goes so far out of their way to honor their veterans. On the other side of this wall, Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, said, "A nation is judged by the men it produces." But it's also judged on how it honors its heroes and its veterans. Well, Quincy's judged. I don't think I've ever been part of something like this before. I've felt so much goodwill from so many. Not just towards me, but towards all of the Vietnam veterans who served. I'm very proud to be a citizen of Clinton. I'm very proud to be able to speak here today on behalf of these men and all other Vietnam veterans. Thank you to you all.
Sometimes we make mistakes. Mr. Belinda made a mistake. I made a couple of mistakes earlier. The Ralph Willard family is here. I know Sergeant Willard is on the Quincy Police Department, but his namesake was a captain in the United States Navy. The 32nd Assistant Commandant of the Corps, when we did his square, came down and spoke. A Marine going out the extra yard for a captain. With that, Mr. Nicholson, Mr. Connors, would you please place the wreath? Would Mr. Pitts and Mr. Keith please come forward and read the names of the deceased Vietnam combat veterans from our beloved city of Quincy. Gentlemen.
David J. Puglisi. George R. Levesque,
Thomas Chiminello,
James H. Kavicki Jr.,
Robert J. Fay,
David A. Pitt,
James A. Stark,
Lawrence E. Soroy,
James F. Murray,
Peter J. Gary,
Gary J. Webb,
James M. Barry,
Paul V. Grasso,
Martin R. Keefe,
Ralph W. Caspol,
James J. Jenks Jr.,
Charles L. Bolfocci,
Richard S. Davis Jr.,
Alfred V. Schofield,
James M. Walsh,
David F. G. Marr,
David O. Sullivan,
Richard C. Archer,
Ralph J. Willard,
George F. Bell Jr.,
Peter J. Landry,
Francois J. Boulart,
Brian P. Ahern,
Richard D. Walsh,
James C. Daigle,
Richard D. Slack Jr.,
Basil L. Sorello,
James P. Hickey,
John H. Morgan,
Joseph M. Pignato,
Leo F. Grady,
John P. Coughlin,
Richard J. Vasconcelos,
Warren C. Diamond,
Lawrence A. Grenham,
George W. Underwood,
Raymond J. West,
George A. Nash,
James E. Casal,
Christopher C. Donahue,
Gerald R. Peterson,
John W. Granahan.
Fire detail. Chaps, Mr. LaFleur. Reverend Jack.
In the mythology of arms, there exists the place called Fiddler's Green. Fiddler's Green was established by the gods, the legend goes, where warriors can rest as they trudge on the road to hell. Fiddler's Green is a place where the cavalryman finds water and fodder for his horse. The infantryman finds a place of rest to sit. The sailor finds his safe harbor, and it's a place that they never leave. Fiddler's Green. I'm going to read a little prayer given to me by a Marine today that reminded me of Fiddler's Green. Be our honored guests this day, O Lord, and join with us in laughter, good food, good drink, and the telling of tall tales and legends that may occasionally exceed the truth. We bow our heads to those who were lost in places that had names meaningless until the muddy Marines landed, and that mud reaffirmed the one legacy that brings all Marines together, for the blood and tears shed for service, for country, and for each other. Hear, O Israel, hear, O Israel, hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God, the Lord thy God, the Lord thy God is one.
I just have about 2 minutes of your time. A gentleman by the name of Ray Kronitsky passed away. He was a member of the Quincy Brigade of the 82nd Airborne. Ray had 4 combat jumps in World War II behind enemy lines. He also lost his son, Ray Kopinski Jr. in South Vietnam. He's killed in action 30 April 1969. Now, my right, your left. Young cadets from the North Quincy High School Junior ROTC under the direction of Major Philip Harden and Master Sergeant John D. Lorenzo. These young people volunteered their time today. You know, school is closed, but here they are. That's right. Give it to them. They deserve every minute. Look at them. Looking sharp. The Quincy Police Department's Quincy's finest. I couldn't say enough about you. Marine Corps League Caddy Detachment, Mark Conley. The Leatherneck Honor Society, Mr. Ray Marino. Thank you, gentlemen. 2nd Marine Division, Vinnie Dolan and his boys. Robert I. Nicholson, Post 382. Jim Doherty, Commander. Cyril P. Morissette, Post 294, the best post in the East Coast. Bobby Lewis, my commander. Special Ops Lieutenant Sorgi, Lieutenant Corliss, and the bikes. What a job they did today, getting us around the city. The community police officers volunteering their time. And for you people in Quincy, if you didn't see Director of Quincy Veteran Services, Mr. Bradley, he's over getting his blood pressure. Been kind of high lately. And Mary Ann McCormick from their office for doing all the work. I can't forget Bob LaFleur and Mo Murad. 2 special girls, Nancy Conley and Linda Pershad, Reverend Jack, and thank you, Wayne Scott from Marine Corps League for the flags. And there's one person who, if I don't mention her name, I'll probably get evicted. My wife, Ruth, for putting up with me for the last 4 months. The phones ring at 6:30 in the morning to 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And most importantly, you people, because I'm telling you, that's what drives me, it drives Tommy. We look out on a cold, windy day like this, 82, 84 years old, Bobby, my good friend, that's sitting in wheelchairs. Sal, I love you, brother. You know that. How many years for us? Been a long time. Every year they show up. So when you complain about the wind, the wind, why don't you ask these people? They're 3 times older than some of you. Thank you very much. See you next year.